First of all, one of the things I saw in your latest book, you say that great leaders aren't born, they're not made either. They're in the making. And I love that, but explain what you mean by that.
What I mean by that is I look at it as leadership is a continuous journey. It's not a fixed destination. It isn't something that you simply become at a certain point and then you stop evolving. You know what I mean? It's an ongoing process of growth and learning. And when I say that not being born, some people out there think that leadership is an innate ability. It's a talent. It's something that you're either born with or you don't have. But I don't really think that's the case. While some people have, let's say, natural charisma or certain qualities, I believe that leadership is built and developed over experiences and time instead of something that you're born with. And when it comes to, let's say, not being made, you don't just become a great leader by taking a few classes or reading some books or having like this really strict path. In my opinion, there's really no one size fits all approach to becoming a leader. To me, it's all about adaptability, constant learning, execution, not just learning, but execution, and being open to change. And so I think the key is that leadership is basically it's a work in progress. You're always learning, adjusting, evolving, facing new challenges. And as you develop as a leader, you learn from feedback, mistakes, and really, I think a lot of it comes down to just being curious.
It's interesting you say that because I think I've learned that along my journey is that it's sort of a never-ending lifelong journey. But like you think that some point you've mastered something. So why isn't like that we master leadership? Why is it has to be a continuous journey? Why is it a lifelong? Why we can't we just sort of figure it out and then we have the best answers for all the time?
Well, first of all, I typically don't have all the answers to begin with. I always have to find and go different places to get them or surround myself by great people. And I also think that, I'm 52 years old and I think leadership's really evolved and changed over time. And at least how I led 20, 30 years ago is much, much different than it is today. And you have all these different generations, Gen Z, millennial, and everybody, and they have different goals and purposes and ways of seeing things. So I think it's important to continue to learn, adapt, and be able to evolve as a leader. And doing that takes constant learning.
So how do you develop a mindset to be a lifelong learner? Because one of the things that I struggle with is that the people that consume my podcast, the people that read my books, probably that read your books, are the ones that are working hard to become better leaders. They understand it's a lifelong process. The ones that consider themselves having arrived, they're the ones not listening to leadership podcasts and trying to get better. So what's the shift that has to take place to create that mindset of being like, look, I'm going to be curious, I'm going to learn, I'm going to try to get better at this because I know it's always evolving.
I think that in some people, it's just the way they're, the way they've always been, that they're humble and they're curious and they want to continue to grow and learn. And others who are able to make the shift maybe start off as what I call a know-it-all, and something doesn't go well for them, and they get humbled and they realize that, hey, my approach wasn't the best, and they're able to adapt, become more humble, and learn and grow. Where I'm sure you've seen this just like I have. There are certain people out there, even friends of mine, who are know-it-alls. They've got it
Mm.
all figured out. No matter what you try to tell them, they kind of roll their eyes and look at you, and they're not really paying attention because they have all the answers. They have it all figured out. And those people, they're not listening to your podcast or they're not reading my book or your book. They've just got it all figured out. It's their way or the highway. But I think the problem with that, John, is, and I'm sure you probably agree with me, that I think you're going to get stomped on. You're going to be left behind in the dust if you have all the answers and you're not open to change and adapt.
Yeah, I can see that as well. Yeah, for sure. You've coined the phrase, and I love it, the learn it all leader. And you just mentioned the difference between that and a know it all leader. So, learn it all leader, what's that encompass? Is just like we've been talking about, just lifelong learning? Is there more to it?
There is more to it because if it's, I had a guy on my podcast, David Katz, who said learning without doing is treason, and I think that
Mm.
that's fantastic. You can take classes and you can read 100 books, but if you don't put any of it into practice, if you don't execute on anything, then I think you're really wasting you're wasting your time and effort. Where I think that part of being a learn it all leader, there's certain traits that I think are really important. One of those is having the courage to go out and try things, not being afraid to make mistakes. And because a lot of times that's where the best learning comes in play. If you fail at something, you get feedback like I used to in baseball, where, maybe you strike out and you get some instant feedback. You got to come learn from your last mistakes and put it in practice. So a learn it all leader isn't somebody who's just out there learning constantly. They're learning, doing, iterating, and always trying to find ways to get better and also give it back and help others become great leaders.
I love that you shared that because I think one of the things I've been working on my doctorate right now, and so in spending time in the academic world, you get a lot of learning and a lot of studies and a lot of details, and then and the other side of the fence is practitioners, which is what I've done for 30 years. It's like I've done a lot of things and learned through that. And what's interesting is that they're like two separate camps in a lot of cases where the academics do all the learning and the studying and the research and they come up with all these great theories, and oftentimes it never bridges over to the practice side. Like I was surprised at so many things I never heard of when I started studying leadership at a doctoral level. I'm like, I've been doing this 30 years. I never even heard of this theory. I've never heard of this
Yeah.
idea. And so I part of my job is try to figure out how to blend the two worlds, like bringing the practical and the academic together. And I love what you say here. You said, I don't know if it was learning or knowledge without action is treason. I love that
Right.
idea, is that you've got to actually put the rudder in the water. You got to steer the sailboat and you got to figure out what worked, what didn't work. And because I think there's a lot of learning that takes place just through mistakes, through things that just didn't work, and then or things that do work. And you sort of build this experience level just by all the various actions you take place. So I think that's a big important part of learning as well.
I agree with you 100%. And I'm not going to, say anything negative about Ivy League schools or, getting PhDs, whatever. That's fantastic. Now, that wasn't me growing up. Like I said, I was a baseball player. I went to Arizona State. And at the time, learning, education, that type of education was kind of lower on my list. But I think it's important. It's great, especially somebody like you who could kind of merge the two. And I think the book learning and everything is great, but you also have to put it into practice, like we talked about. And I think that learn it all leaders are great extractors as well. They're able to learn from everybody that they come in touch with. So they open themselves up to a world where they, like we talked about a little bit, they're curious, they're asking questions, they're getting ideas, and they they can get more out of than just reading books and taking classes. I think you got to stick your neck out there and put it into practice because, like you and I both said, that's where a lot of the real learning takes place, is trying, failing, doing, and trying it again.
Yeah, I mean, for me at least, I as much as I'm an academic and studying for my doctorate, I'm a practical learner. I have to do it, and I have to learn the hard way. Sometimes, just I've got to make the mistakes. I got to fall on my face, and those lessons are really deeply embedded in me now because I've done it, versus just reading a book about. No, don't do this, or this is going to happen. I've got to see it myself. And that's it's actually a great way to learn, is making mistakes and failing for sure. One thing I was going to wondering is your, you talk about being a baseball player and you learned a lot of leadership through athletics. What were some unique? Because I think it's a unique way to come at leadership is from an athletic perspective, especially a team sport. What are some key lessons that you learned along the way as an athlete, as a baseball player, that sort of really work well when you're talking to people about the leadership of business or any other entity?
So for me, a very short version of my story is that I played college baseball. I thought I was going to go pro. That didn't work out. And John, I was left at 22. Like, what is my identity? Everything I was put into being a baseball player. And when that ended, I was kind of at a loss and I didn't know if any of my skills were transferable. And what I've been able to find over the years, that what I call an athletic education, was incredible. Uh, and you learn things like collaboration, working well with others, discipline that I'm sure obviously you got out of the military, persistence, and all of that kind of stuff is what I learned on the field. But I learned from playing. I had I played for three Hall of Fame baseball coaches, and I didn't realize it at the time, but I learned about vision through them. At Pepperdine, the goal was to win the College World Series. Well, I got hurt and left before it happened, but that actually happened. Setting moonshot goals and going for it, getting everybody on the team moving in the same direction. And so there's all these lessons that I didn't realize at the time that were able to carry over to my professional career. And as we were backstage, you mentioned I had some great leaders, some terrible leaders. I also had some terrible leaders, terrible coaches. I had one coach who made everything about him. If things went well, it was his play calling, it was his lineup. But the second something went wrong, he pushed out the blame on everybody else. And
Mm.
I just thought, what a terrible way to motivate or demotivate your team. And so experiencing something like that, I've always learned, or I've always tried to put my team first, give them the wins. And if things didn't go well, congratulate them. But if things didn't go well, as a small business owner or as a leader, I would always say, hey, I have your back, as other teammates would in sports. And as a leader, I have your back, and I'll take the brunt of it, and we'll work together and we'll get through this. So there's all kinds of lessons and skills you learn from playing sports that carry over to the business world.
It's really interesting that you have these foundational experiences that sort of set in motion like your leadership path. And I know, my military background was the same thing. Like I didn't realize I was learning all these leadership skills. I was just doing the job, right? And then you get
Right.
out, and it really was only 10 years ago I started thinking like, why am I leading my businesses this way? And I'm like, oh wow, it's because this is the way we did in the military, and it made sense, right? And it always stuck with me is that's the right way to do things. And so it's interesting to see the parallels to your athletic career being a similar thing. Like you go back to what worked or what how you felt in the moment or the experiences you had with a good coach. And I want to have that impact on my employees in the same kind of way. Or how do you set the vision, like you said, of winning the College World Series? What is the moonshot for our business, and how do we get people excited and get them on board with that, and so you learn all these great lessons. And it sounds like you're you've now suddenly realized like, oh, this all came from my baseball career.
Yeah, and I think one parallel between the military and baseball was also that there is some command and control when it comes to leadership, of course, and that doesn't really fly these days too much anywhere. Um, but even with that being said, you know, you learn work ethic, and you also what's really helped I learned from all these coaches is that they really help inspire you as well, right? They help motivate you, inspire you, and I would say the motivation would help me build up that work ethic that I have that's really been helpful for me over the years.
Yeah, I think the coaches can. One of the things I see is they see potential in a player that maybe the player doesn't see themselves, and I see that in
100%.
great leaders where they'll see somebody. And I'm like that. I love developing talent, like just finding a raw diamond and like, oh shoot, this person's got something that I've never seen before. I have an employee like that right now that I'm just seeing some glimmers of it, and I'm trying to give him those opportunities where he can express and do some things that are challenging and really just bring his kind of let his expertise blossom. But I see it, and it's like I love that. And I know great coaches do that too. They see something in a player that's special and they work to develop it. And I love that about coaches.
I think that that's one of the keys for your listeners out there who are leaders or want to be leaders. I think great leaders do just that. Sometimes they bring out things in people that people don't even know that they have in them, or they don't even realize. I mean, I remember I had this one young lady who I think this was about 10 years ago. She was 26 years old and she was down on herself. And I said, "Hey, look at what you've already accomplished. This, and this." And she didn't even realize it, but having somebody, a leader who believed in her, helped her really build up her confidence. And that's something, whether you're a parent, whether you're a coach, whether you're a leader, I think that's one of the real special things that great leaders can do is they can make people understand how great they are or what they've been able to accomplish and inspire them to continue to do more, just like it sounds like you're doing with your current employee.
Yeah. I think even you learn that from parenting. You sort of figure out like, what do your kids excel at and what are they interested in? You give them those opportunities and you let them, blossom and grow in the areas that they are excited about. And the same thing with employees. If you get people engaged and excited about things that they're excited about, and you put them in the right role where they feel like they've been put on earth to do that one thing, and they're in the role to do that in your company, you sort of just have to get out of the way because it's going to work out well. And that's a hard thing to do with leaders. It means getting to know your people and getting to know, what excites them, what gets them out of bed every morning, what do they really want to do in their life. And if you can match the needs of the business and the things that they want to do, and you put those in place in pursuit of the organization's goals, it's magic when it happens. And it's hard to do, but it's magic when it happens.
I agree 100%. And I've always, my leadership, I'm kind of curious to see what you think. I think we're on the same page here, is I'm a big fan on focusing on people's strengths over their weaknesses.
Mm.
I'm not saying you shouldn't improve people's weaknesses, but I think great leaders do just what you said. They get curious, they're present, and they learn where people are strong. And typically when people are strong, they're passionate about that and they're going to want to do better. Going back to a baseball analogy, for listeners out there who like baseball, somebody can play third base, but maybe they're a much better pitcher. I think it's the coach's responsibility to take the team that they have, the talent that they have, and carve it out and put the pieces of the puzzle together so people are in the best position to succeed. And that's why I think it's important to focus on strengths instead of trying to push the rock up the hill all the time on weaknesses. Of course, try to improve the weaknesses where possible, but I think that there's a lot more bang for your buck if you take those strengths, and a lot of times they're not all the way maximized. So help them get to that level and really improve in those areas.
I love that. It's such a great point. One of the books that really changed my thinking on this was a book called "First Change All the Rules" by Marcus Buckingham, and he said that people over the age of 30 don't change much, and so we should stop spending time trying to change them by, like you said, improving their weaknesses, but instead capitalize on their strengths. Like, what are they great at, and like put them in the role where they're great at it. And we spend so much time as leaders, especially I saw that in big corporations. We spend a lot of time dealing with challenging employees. Well, a lot of cases, those challenging employees are just in the wrong role. They're good at something. We have to figure out what they're great at and plug them into that. Just to your point, where they can grow those strengths and contribute in the best way they can to the organization. So instead of trying to change them and trying to make an operations guy be a marketing guy, it's not going to work, right? You put him
Yeah.
in the right role. A pitch, like you said, a first baseman and a pitcher, they're different. They're different people.
Yeah. And, a story I have about that is a gentleman came on our team. His name is Joe Patty. He came in as a sales rep and he had all the core values of Learn It. And he was a great team member, but he really struggled when it came to doing sales. He just couldn't pick it up. But I knew he was somebody who had a great work ethic. He was disciplined. He would show up on time. He got along with people. He was a team player. So I sat him down and I just said, "Hey, Joe, I think that you're somebody we want to have around here. You're obviously miserable with doing what you're doing." And I just kind of got curious again. And it turned out that he had a computer science degree. He liked acting and he's been a fantastic instructor for 10 years for us now. And that
Mm,
was putting him in a position to succeed. Now, I'm sure you feel the same way. Sometimes people are just not the right fit and they
yeah,
just don't
yeah,
belong.
yeah,
And I always, some of the people I coach and work with is don't always just try to move people around if they're not doing well. Sometimes they just need to be coached out. But if
yeah.
you had somebody in this case like Joe who had a lot of the strengths and a lot of the values that we wanted at Learn It, there's ways to find where to put them to be successful.
Yeah, yeah, it absolutely. One of the things I like to say is that sometimes we have people in our organizations that they're like a puzzle piece that doesn't fit within our puzzle. And it is not that they're not a good person; they're just not a good fit for our organization. And so they're also, but I also believe that the perfect puzzle piece for someone else's puzzle. And so one of the best things we can do when people don't fit is to coach them out, like you said, and then help them land into that right puzzle that they fit and they belong. And every time I've done that with employees that just didn't work out, I've seen them thrive where they go. They go to the place that fits them better and what they're naturally gifted towards. And so it's always been, I've always seen that it's just the wrong piece to our, it's not the puzzle piece that fits within our puzzle.
Exactly. And sometimes, well, a lot of times at Learn It or companies we work with, especially new leaders, they'll feel miserable having to let people go. They're like, oh,
Yeah.
this is
Yeah.
terrible. This is terrible. I have to do this. Well, first of all, people should never be let go if it's a surprise to them. Hopefully, there's coaching and performance going on during the time. But a lot of times, John, people are relieved when they get let go
Yeah.
because they're just
Yeah.
miserable coming to work every day.
Yeah.
And so you're helping them move on and find a perfect organization, like you said, the perfect piece to a puzzle in a different organization. Now, I also think that that happens sometimes as companies evolve. You know,
Mm,
if you're
yeah.
an organization and you're just starting off, and let's say you're going from $500,000 to maybe 3 million, and you have somebody who's the head of operations, maybe they're fantastic for that role. But maybe when you get to 3 or 4 million and you're now at 50 employees, 100, 200 employees, maybe they're not the right person. Maybe they're not the right fit for that anymore. And it's time for them to move on. And I think it's your responsibility as a leader to that person, but also to your organization to help that person transition out, help them find other jobs if you can. And I've done this many times in my career where I've had hard conversations with somebody, and I would just be like, "Hey, I really appreciate everything done. It's time for you to move on." And maybe they don't love it at first, but I've seen people, really thrive after that. And
Yeah.
that's why I like to say that there are people that I work with who are friends, but I like to look at it as more of a team over a family. And I think as a leader, a small business owner, that it's your responsibility to put an elite team on the field at all times. And a lot of times that takes making hard decisions.
I love that. To put an elite team on the field at all times. I like to think of my company. We're a small manufacturing company, and I see ourselves as like we compete with the big guys. We're the smallest competitor in our industry, and I like to think of us as a Navy SEAL team. So we may be small, but we're just as mighty as a land army. Like we can wreak havoc on a land army because we're I consider us like a SEAL team. We have experts in all different areas, and we're small, but we're very effective. And I love that idea of the think of it a team, not a family, but a team. And yeah, that's a great analogy. Yeah, one of the things I was thinking about as you were going through that is that even from my experience, and I would, for leaders listening in, is that your organization might shift underneath your feet too, and it might be time for you to leave. And I had that happen in my corporate career where I was in a company that was kind of early in its corporate life, and they were hiring general managers who were out of the box thinkers. They were getting things done. Basically we were given a lot of autonomy. We're told make money, send it to, in this case, it was Zurich was our headquarters, make money, send it to Zurich, and then keep doing it. And that's what our directions were. And I thrived in that kind of environment because it wasn't very, there was a lot of autonomy, a lot of accountability, and it was all about results. And I loved it. But over time, the company morphed and grew into a global company where everything was top down managed, and my degrees of freedom kept going away year after year. So I was still responsible for the business and accountable, but I didn't have the authority to make the decisions. And so the organization changed, and the kind of person they wanted running the businesses was not the maverick, get things done kind of guy. It was the one that followed the rules, and I wasn't that person. So I found myself like I don't fit within this organization anymore. It's time for me to leave. So leaders, you might find yourself in that kind of situation where the organization shifts underneath your feet and you're no longer, and I wasn't enjoying myself either. And I was having fun in those small business days. I didn't like it when it was a big business.
And I was listening to one of your other episodes where your guest said that only 10% of leaders have self-awareness. And I
Yeah.
think that this is a great example of having self-awareness and being honest with yourself that, maybe, and again, I look at it as difference between a learn-it-all and a know-it-all. Maybe it's like you can't have your stick in the ground saying, this is how it's always been. This is what the organization is. Like you said, John, sometimes the organization is going to shift under your feet. Well, there's really nothing you can do about it. They're moving in a different direction. Either you got to learn and adapt and get on board, or if you're miserable coming to work every day, then it's time to make an exit, go do something different. There's nothing
Yeah.
wrong with quitting and changing and moving on. I mean, you've given it your all, but you got to have that self-awareness to be honest with yourself that, hey, maybe this isn't a great fit. Otherwise, maybe your leader or manager or board member or somebody's going to make that decision for you. But it's better to be proactive when it comes to that than being
Yeah.
reactive.
Yeah, and I think, to what you just said, if you're starting to feel miserable, start thinking about like when was a time when I loved it. I love coming into work every day. And then you start getting a picture of what you really enjoy about what you do. And you can find where, for my case at least, I discovered soon, oh, this is what's missing from my job, like my autonomy, my the adrenaline of like no safety net, and I'm out there. It's all about results, and it's all based on my decisions, who I hire, who I fire, who I promote. And I missed that. I missed that adrenaline of doing it on my own. Instead, I had safety nets everywhere and I had approval processes everywhere. I'm like, oh, this is not fun.
Yeah.
I just lost all of its
It's like a
luster.
180.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was a complete 180. And I found myself sort of like, I'm the wrong person for this job. This is not who I am. I'm not really good at just listening to, getting permission for everything. I'm about getting things done. So anyways, for me, it wasn't a fit. And I think, again, go back to where you think about what you really loved about your job in the past, and that find the position where you get to do what you love. So one thing
Absolutely.
I wanted to shift the discussion. We're talking about the learn it all leader. Can you create a learn it all organization? And what does that look like? And how do you build that in an organization's culture?
So at Learn It, we do a lot of manager training, leadership training, and a lot of the customers and clients we work with, they want to build what I like to call a learning culture. And building a learning culture, it really starts with leadership. I mean, leaders have to be bought into it, right? And they need to be championing it. And when it comes to learning, it can be formal training, coaching like you and I do, and or it could be informal. But it starts with leadership in the sense that you want to be able to create time and space for people to go out and try things and learn in learn in the flow, so that you turn it into an environment where people feel safe and they have that autonomy where they can try things, and if things break and fail, that they can learn from it. And one of the best ways to do that is to have leaders who aren't afraid to admit that they don't have all the answers, right? That they don't have all that they don't know everything, and that they're vulnerable enough to say, hey, I don't have an answer to this, so I'm going to go reach out to this person and I'm going to learn from you, and I'm going to learn from you, and we're going to do this together as a team. And I think when you do that and you create an environment where people are curious, and that's where ideas bubble up all the time from all different directions. And then sure, you could layer that in with what Learn It does, where you invest in your team and you set aside training and coaching. And at that point, it's really important too. I like to call it learning time off, LTO. People have PTO, but you actually, you invest in training for people, but you actually give them space and time to do the learning and do the training, because people want to continue to evolve their skills. And I think now more than ever, I mean, we've been at it. I mean, I've been at this for 3 decades now. I think now more than ever, you need to be a learning culture, because the average lifespan of skills are only 6 months now.
Yeah.
And so with AI and everything else going on, the rapid pace of change, I think one of the top skills you could have as an organization, as an individual, is learning agility, the ability to learn, the ability to learn, change, and adapt, and creating an environment where that is acceptable and rewarded. And that's where people really thrive. And so it just goes back to kind of starting with leadership. And I know one of your sayings is leadership matters, and in my case, that's where it really matters, where leaders get involved and they champion it and they give people the opportunities and the space to learn and grow. And I think it really benefits organizations, because I'll just say it again, ideas pop up from everywhere. They bubble up from everywhere,
Yeah.
from
Yeah.
frontline workers, because everybody's trying to learn, grow, and hey, maybe we could do this differently. Maybe we could approach this. And I mean, you're talking about that some of the manufacturing firms are much bigger and probably much slower. They don't have that kind of environment, where your Navy SEAL type environment, where people are learning, trying, and doing things differently. And that's how you can beat people, and you can grow and advance.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I love it. The environment where if you make a mistake, it's not the end of the world. We're going to learn from those mistakes. And I think when you have a culture where, where you fire people that make mistakes, then no one wants to make a mistake. No one tries new things. Everybody's afraid to, color outside the lines, and then nothing gets done. So the culture, how the leadership establishes the culture, can create the kind of learning environment you were talking about is really critical. So yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I have a friend who works for 1,000 person company, and everybody is afraid to say or do anything.
yeah,
It's from the CEO down. Everybody's yes men, you
yeah,
know, and if they don't do it the way the CEO wants it, then they're afraid for their jobs.
yeah,
So there's really no growing and evolving there. And I asked my friend, I'm like, why do you stay around? And he said, well, it's a tough out there to find other jobs, but there's really no growth in an organization like that because you can't come up with ideas or give constructive feedback to the senior leaders because it's this way or the highway. So people are scared. And who wants to work in an environment like that? I wouldn't even want to lead in an environment like that.
yeah, yeah. Well, the company I work for became what I call the good news company. No one ever brought any but bad news up because they fear being fired. So it was just everything was good, everything was run, but it wasn't good. But we all said it was good, and so we just ignored the bad things, and that's not good. You're not learning, you're not growing, you're not making improvements. You're just sweeping it under the rug, moving on to the
You
next
got your
thing.
head down trying to keep your job.
Yeah, exactly. It's a different attitude altogether.
A lot of times when we're working with companies, it's one thing to learn these skills. It's another thing to build a culture of learning where people are constantly curious, that they're active listening, that they're trying things, that they're iterating and they're changing. So I really think that learning agility from a leadership perspective, but permeate throughout the organization is absolutely critical today and moving forward in the future.
And I'd resonate with all of that because obviously both of us is doing a podcast show and we come across a lot of very knowledgeable people who are accelerating the speed at which people learn. One young gentleman I'm going to bring up, his name's Scott Young, and he wrote the book called Ultra Learning. And while you were speaking, I was there. He just wrote another one and did a podcast on Get Better at Anything, 12 Maxims for Mastery. Now, I happen to have been old enough to actually sit with George Leonard, who wrote the first book on mastery in his living room in Palo Alto. Or no, it wasn't Palo Alto. It was right near you. It was up there
Sausalito.
in Tiburon, right?
Yep.
And George wrote this book on mastery. And it's interesting when you're going to master something, the steps in the process. Do you have the Damon mastery kind of theory about learning? Because what Scott does is he takes something very difficult and then he learns it really fast and then he shows you how you can do it, right? And I
Mhm.
think that's what Learn It does to a degree. It's like, hey, I can take this one course and I can master this particular subject. Anything from Scott, anything from you, Damon, or Learn It that you would like to tell our listeners about mastery?
Yeah. So for me, what I've seen that's really helped when I really want to learn something, what I do is first of all, when I'm learning it, I take a lot of notes. But also I find ways, I think about how it relates to my work at Learn It or the work I do with coaching individuals or whatever it is, right? So I connect it to a real world situation. But listeners out there, I think this is key, especially if you lead a team. Teach it back to them. Teaching it back, I think it helps you with the retention, and also at the same time, you're sharing this knowledge with others, and you're getting their perspective on things. So, to me, that's what I'm kind of lucky because we want to lead by example here at Learn It. So we do a lot of internal book clubs or we watch master classes, and a lot of times, Greg, I lead those. I'll read the book, and then I'll teach it back to our team, and it enhances my retention, and it also helps my team. But I always ask them. I say, when we go through this content, I want you to I want you to come to me with an example of how you could apply what we're talking about, either in your personal life or to learn it. Now, one other thing I want to say about learning, if you lead a team or if you don't, it doesn't matter, is all your learning shouldn't just be constantly about your job or your work. I think it's really critical to learn broadly, learn different topics. We have like a stipend for our employees here at Learn It, and I let them take classes in whatever they want, right? It doesn't have to be applicable just to Learn It. I just want to get them back in the habit of learning and hopefully retaining and accelerating their growth.
So what I hear you saying is that even if you're not born with those innate skills, everybody could become a leader if they put in the work to become more curious, to be self-aware, and really go for it.
I do. And I think you have to want it though. Being a leader is not just a position with more money because you were really good at something. Being a leader is caring for people. In my opinion, in what I've learned, what I've studied, what I've researched, what I teach, is that you have to be curious. You have to be optimistic. You have to be aligned. The things we talk about in my program. And then at the end, and that's that backstop, you and I both love baseball, which is that self-awareness, right? It's like, okay, I was just talking about this with somebody the other day, right? You walk into a meeting, you're the leader. We'll do a mini case study here, Damon. Let's have some fun.
Do it.
Right? You walk into a meeting, you've got your agenda, and you say, okay, you're thinking about it. You're walking in, you go through the door, you see the sea of 20 people. They're all looking at you. It's an important meeting. You have your agenda in your hand. You literally either have your laptop, a piece of paper, something to reference. You look down, okay, here we go, everybody. And you say, here are the 5 things we need to do. Does anyone have any questions? All right, there's a couple of questions. And then you leave. Anyone could do that, right? Anyone with a title and the access to those people based on an org chart or whatever can walk in there and do that. But there's nuance to it. How do you walk in? Who do you look at? What do you say? Are you smiling? How do you greet everybody? Do you create an open environment through a little bit of humor, through humility? Hey, how's it going? Did you see the game last night? Or, hey, I understand you had that huge project. How did it go? Or, great job to the person sitting 5 seats to the right? How's everybody doing? Okay, everybody. And then you ease into the agenda. And notice all those little checkpoints I just said. It's about voice, eye contact, humility, spirit, right? I mean, I'm not getting too deep here, but like what is your body language saying? And Damon, as you know, when you coach people in this, they say, I don't have time for this. Well, in my programs, I have little studies and I compare a way to greet and open a meeting, and I get people to do it on their iPhone or whatever, a little stopwatch, I don't care. Time somebody opening a meeting in a harsh, like no time, I'm doing it in quotes, right, type of way, compared to, hey, let's welcome everybody. And the difference is negligible. It's like 2 or 3 seconds different. It's a mindset. It's how you think about people and how you welcome them and create openness and being inclusive to everyone and bringing everyone in. And then you can leave the meeting. What does it take just to have like some polite and exchanges? It takes 45 seconds, 1:30, even if it took 5 minutes. How do you think those people feel when they leave? They're going to be ready to do whatever is needed because they feel like they're part of something. And that is what obviously you could see by the way I'm talking now. I feel very strongly about that. Kindness. There's such a place for kindness and compassion in leadership. I just could talk about it all day.
George, I wanted to pivot over to this idea of disruption. Actually, I think it kind of connects a lot to what you're saying, because disruption is something that you've embraced in your own life. And I think you're embracing it in terms of the ways you're approaching businesses moving forwards, how you're working with management, consulting with your clients, how you're approaching speak. But yeah, can you say a little bit more about your take on disruption, which was so like everybody is excited to disrupt with Silicon Valley, and I feel like that word has almost become like kind of a dirty word. How do you think about it? How do you mean it?
Yeah, so I'm the kind of guy that wants to do it different than anybody else, and sometimes it's ass backwards, right? Like sometimes I'll, sometimes I'm going to go from New York to Boston via Florida, right? Like, and just go the wrong way and take too long to get there. But most of the times I'm trying to be strategic about something when I want to do something in a different way that makes my product stand out, whether it's my client's work, whether it's my work, something I'm doing for myself, something in my community. Everybody knows me knows when George does it, it was done differently. I try and I have one son and 3 daughters. I work with my son every day. He's at this pivotal age. He's 13, turning 14, where I want him to just get it. I want him to understand. Don't listen to everybody. Don't try and be like everybody else. Don't try and keep up with the Joneses. Like, do your own thing, be your own person, do it your own way. So when it comes to consulting, we started as a management consulting firm, and I was looking to the big 6 out there, the Bain, McKinsey's, all these companies to kind of be the model of like what I wanted to do on a very small level. By the way, we are tiny compared to them. But it was boring. It was like I came out of this place of, when I was in the pharmacy world, I loved the business of it. That's what excited me. I got bored with the clinical end of it. It's why I didn't want to do it anymore. And so am I going to be the management consultant that does it the exact same way as one of these big 6 consulting firms? But by the way, they do it a million times better than me, and they have a million times more firepower. No, I have to differentiate myself. So we started going in different directions, right? You come in, you're not the guy with the spreadsheets and the KPIs and all of this stuff, which you need. No, I'm the guy that speaks to everybody. It starts with people for us, right? So if I go into a company to consult, I'm interviewing every single employee from the janitor to the CEO, because I want to hear, what do you think of this company? What is right? What is wrong? What could be better about it? What do you like about your job? What are your personal goals? What are your professional goals, right? That company that hires me to fix something going on with their employees, right? That disconnect, typically it's a 2-way street. I'm just opening up lines of communication, and I'm saying, hey, day 1, you hired this guy because you thought he was the perfect fit and he could add value to your company. You started working for this guy because you thought this culture here and this environment was perfect and that you could thrive here. Where did we diverge since day 1? Let's get back to that day 1 mindset to get creative here. And so we started realizing that we can consult in a different way, different solutions, not just, here's a strategy plan, here's a business plan, here's a marketing plan. Hey, let's get you out there as thought leaders. Let's start a podcast for you guys. Let's do this. Let's do that. So I started calling it Consulting Plus, right? It's more than just management consulting. It's different. If you're looking for a straight up management consultant, that's not me, right? We're going to be a little more innovative, a little bit different. So that's that business. Speak is the same thing. We're trying to turn the whole thing on its ear and give people an opportunity. And even those ones that want to reach that elite status as speakers, we want to give them that opportunity where they might not be afforded that opportunity with TED platform because their speaking style or their subject matter doesn't fit the ideas worth spreading thing. So everything I do, I try and really look at it from all different angles, all different perspectives in order to do it in a way that'll really stand out and be different. Innovation via disruption. That was the impact of innovation via disruption was the title of my first TEDx talk. And it was about business and my personal life and how I disrupted who I was in order to innovate and create impact that way.
That's great. I almost have this sense that like business as usual is that almost kind of leads down that asshole path if you're not careful. And the willingness to like just step back and kind of break some things in terms of your perceptions and how you're just operating in a daily way. You have to be willing to do that sometimes, or you're just gonna be stuck in that rut. We had a question here from somebody. I don't know how much you want to share this or not, but it was like bitter experiences during your tenure at a consulting firm. Now, to be clear, you weren't working at McKinsey or Bain or one of those big organizations. You were in pharma, but I know you've worked with a bunch of different organizations. Maybe like, what are some of the things that you maybe have seen that you wish just weren't the case, that people could do better?
Yeah. So, we've all seen those fix-it shows, right? Bar Rescue, The Prophet, all these kind of things, right? 9 times out of 10, the ownership or the management are the problem. there. So when I go into a company and I hear ownership or C-suite or management that says, we want to learn how to better support these people to be more successful, it's like half the job is done. You're like, this is great. Let's get to work. We just cut out the first 3 weeks of the consult. We're good. Let's dive in right now. 9 times out of 10, that's not the case, because it's like, hey, my employees suck. Fix it. And then you go, wow. Yeah, all right, no problem. Let me look around. Let me do my discovery. And you come back and you go, well, I got something to tell you. You suck. Let's fix you first. So that's the biggest thing. Like, we're in a new age of business now, guys. This is not, 20 years ago, 30 years ago when I started in my professional journey, where it was cut and dry. Like, this is how business works. This is how employees work. You don't fit, you're out, right? Like, this is a different world. There's no such thing as the prototypical employee anymore, the standard work culture or anything, you have to be able to evolve through that. So if I could put one word on what I look for out of the ideal client, is evolution. The willingness to evolve is so important. If I didn't evolve as a small business owner, now, the owner of a global speaking platform, I never would have I would have been out of business years ago, because the world changed. I started Launchpad 516 in 2013. 2024 is a completely different world. And by the way, it's changed like 3 times over since I started. So if we didn't evolve in that time, we would have been gone years ago. It's those companies that are not willing to accept accountability, and the companies that are not willing to evolve, that you go, I can't help you. And, luckily I'm in the place in my business where, and it hurts to do this, but where I can look at a client and go, yeah, we're not a good fit. Yeah, okay, this may be a great consult, this may be big money, but this is not a fit, because it's not going to go well in the end. The deliverables won't be there, and ultimately it's going to affect my reputation, and it's wasting their time, right? It's wasting their time and money.
So we talked about this prior to coming on the show. You had a recent success, or I should say your son had a recent success, when you won the basketball championship. And you said you had a good story to share with us.
I did, yeah. So, like a couple that stem from this, but so when Damon and I were working together on Speak, I think we either had a meet and greet or a virtual rehearsal that I had to miss because my son had a basketball game. I'm not only the commissioner of PAL basketball here in our hometown, but I'm the coach of his 7th, 8th, and 9th grade boys team. I love coaching for a number of reasons, because now that they're older, I've followed him since kindergarten coaching. So now that they're older and there's, real talent there, and the kids are starting to get bigger and it's really competitive now, it's fun to take a raw group at the beginning of the season of all different kids from all different backgrounds, socioeconomic backgrounds, races, cultures, whatever, and turn them into a unified team. When I first started coaching my daughter's basketball team, who's older than him, and then my son's, I played this game with the kids in kindergarten called Scrambled Eggs. I invented it. Scrambled Eggs was where I had the whistle. They would run around the court like maniacs. And then when I blew the whistle, they would freeze. And I would pick one kid to pass to, and they would have to shoot from exactly where they were. The point of the game at the younger age was fun, but also situational awareness. Don't go somewhere where you can't shoot from, right? You shouldn't be at the half court line. You shouldn't be past the 3-point line. In some way, shape, or form, I play this game every single year. So we had a very talented team this year. We built. We were winning games, but there were some tough teams out there. And so the personalities on the team that were tougher to sort of wrangle in, but really talented, they really started to get there, and they started playing as a unit. We won. We had a bye in the first round of the playoffs. We won the semifinals. We made it to the championship. So we had a practice before the championships. A couple of the kids on the team it was really tough for them to understand to play in a certain kind of way. I had this one kid who's a big kid, probably my size, 6'1", but for, 7th, 8th, and 9th grader, he's like a center, right? He's like a Shaquille O'Neal. He's bigger than everybody else. But in actuality, he's the size of a point guard, or shorter than in the NBA. So he's playing like a point guard, but I'm trying to teach this guy the whole season, you're a big man. You need to play like a center in this particular game. It was a tough transition for him. So because he tries to be a shooter, even if the kid was 2 feet away from the basket, he wouldn't do it as a forceful layup. He would take a jump shot from 2 feet from the basket. And you go, no, easy lay-in. It's always going to go in. Look for the square up there. It will go in every single time. So we played Scrambled Eggs for the last half hour of our practice right before the game. Now I'm under the basket, blowing the whistle. They're playing, half the team is playing defense against the other team. So they're just kind of like running around, playing defense on each other. But same thing. I blow the whistle, pass the ball, they shoot the basket. This big kid, once he got under the basket, I'd pass him the ball. He'd shoot his jump shot. He'd miss. That player has to get the rebound, give it back to me. Then they start moving again. I immediately blow the whistle again, pass it back to him, jump shot. He misses, gets the rebound, pass it back to me immediately. So he's not getting anywhere away from the basket. I did it 15, 20 times in a row until that jump shot turned into a layup eventually. Then I would catch him a few minutes later in the same position over and over and over and over again. Bottom line is we destroyed the other team. I think we won by like 25 points. This kid must have had 30 points in the game. And almost every one of those points was an under the basket easy layup, right? So this stuff that I developed when they were so little, for it to correlate 8 years, 9 years later, it's crazy to me. I love it.
That's awesome. I love that story. So much of what you're talking about, it feels like going back to this idea of disruption. It's having the courage to jump in and try things in a new way, and that there is kind of a better version of you, of your organization out there, if you're willing to step back and look at it and kind of do it for the right reasons. And there's a ton of creativity that you're bringing to all these stories that you've talked about, because it's a courage to try something new, but it's also to set that creativity to come up with your game,
Yeah, absolutely. Creativity is at the center of everything I do. I try to be creative. When I'm not in a creative space, I know that it's not going to be George, right? So those are the moments where I have to walk away and go, all right, I need to find the space that I need to be in, the headspace, in order to do this job the right way.
Yeah. You had another story I wanted to hear about before we go. This mistakes equals practice, and I think this is this apples and peaches thing that I've heard you talk about a little bit more. Can you share that story, that idea?
Yeah. So so this came from my first TEDx talk, which I mentioned, which was called The Impact of Innovation via Disruption. So this was about disrupting the way we think about things in order to create impact, to innovate and create impact, right? So what I did during this talk was I used a slide. It was a picture of an apple. And I would tell them at the beginning of this talk, I'd say, every time you see this slide come up and I point at you, you say, this is an apple, right? The entire audience in unison. Now, the theme of it was mistake equals practice, right? Like, I'm going to innovate my life. I'm going to disrupt my life and innovate it by knowing I've made a bunch of mistakes, but knowing that was just practice for when I actually do it the right way, right? I'm doing it I'm doing it wrong 1,000 times, so that the 1,001st time that I do it right, but I do it really right, where I don't need to do it again. I innovated it. So throughout the talk, it's 1, 2, 3, 4 times, first 1 minute, 3 minute mark, 7 minute mark, whatever. Point at them, this is an apple. So then a picture. But I'm also showing them a picture of an Apple computer and an Apple iPhone and Apple Martin, the daughter of Chris Martin and Gwyneth Paltrow, and the New York skyline, the Big Apple, right? So all of these things are apples, but we don't necessarily correlate them as when we say, what is an apple? We're going to say it's this thing. So then I show another picture of a fruit, which happens to be a peach that looked just like the apple. And I pointed them, they say, this is an apple. And I go, no, this is a peach. but you have been trained to think that this thing is the only thing out there that can be an apple. But that's okay, right? We're going to regroup now and we're going to learn, because this is a mistake. We're going to learn from this and make it better. So that, the whole point of the talk was just kind of getting people to understand, don't worry about the mistakes, right? As long as they're not big enough to screw up everybody's lives around you, like, don't worry about it. Like, learn from it, get better. Everything I've done in my career, I've been a sponge. So I'm learning not just from the successes, but my mistakes, other people's mistakes, in order to make me better at what I do. And not only just work, but being a father, being a husband, being a human being, being a man. These are all things that I want to learn in every moment of my life and make it better. The best part about that was I did that talk, production value of that TEDx event wasn't great. I didn't love my delivery of the talk. I loved the talk itself. I didn't love the delivery of it. And I put myself down so much about it. I couldn't even watch the talk for the first year. Lo and behold, this thing that I thought was such a big mistake wound up in a book called The 100 Greatest TED Talks on Innovation, featured my horrible first TEDx talk. Wow. So it was like, you go, yes, this is what the whole talk was about. This is why. So yeah, I love that story.
What role did knocking on doors play in your sales journey, and how has it shaped your success both in sales and entrepreneurship?
Super good question. Man, anybody who asks me, like, I'm part of some program of the DECA high school, something, mentoring some kids. And I tell all this, and just go knock on some doors. Because if you go knock on 10,000 doors, you will be a better communicator. So I think it comes down to communication. When I knocked on doors, there's a big piece of recruiting as well. You're recruiting, you're managing, you're training, and everything is 100% commission based. I was also very successful on the recruiting side, because as I recruited people, it wasn't like, hey, this company is going to pay you 50,000. These guys are 60 and we're 70,000. It was like, forget about that. What do you want to do with your life? I want to be an author. Okay. Tell me how, if I can't teach you how to knock on a door, grab somebody's attention when their kids are in the bath and their dog's barking, and sell them a year-long contract within 15 minutes and peace out. Like, tell me how that's not going to make you be a better author, doctor, teacher, accountant, construction worker. You know what I mean? So I focused on the sales skills, and I guess that's where my answer is going towards. Every interaction is a sell, including me trying to sell you and all the listeners, every interaction is a sell, right? So diving into that door to door and kind of shaking off the, no, Damon, I don't want pest control because I hate you as a person, and interpreting it as more likely what it is, as, no, I'm just not interested, go to the next door, right? If you could separate yourself emotionally from that outcome, then it allows you to take a lot more risk, because you're not really operating as much as out of fear, I guess.
Absolutely. And I think we're all in sales in one way or the other. And going back to, I've heard you say this before, professional communication is so key. What is an example of how knocking on doors has helped you become a better communicator?
The thing that I applied the most to knocking doors that relates to me now, I think it came from the Rich Dad, Poor Dad. But it's all about learning. So I'm knocking doors, making good money as a pest control sales rep at 22, 23-year-old, making $250,000 in 4 or 5 months. But there's other people making more, not that I needed more, but I adapted the mentality of, what is that guy doing, saying, what's he doing with his face? How is he standing? What's he doing that I can't learn? And that mentality then kind of translates really well to sales. If I'm getting an objection, how am I going to craft my pitch to not get that objection again? So a common objection is, oh, I don't have, they open the door, they're like, oh gosh, I don't have any time, right? Let's say that. If they open up the door, you open up the door, before you say, oh crap, I don't have any time, I say, hey, I don't have much time, I'll be quick. I can guarantee what you're not going to say is, oh, well, I also don't have much time, Hey, you're the 20th guy that knocked on my door. Okay, I'm gonna knock on the door. They're gonna open it up, and I say, "Hey, how's it going?" I know what you're thinking. You're probably thinking, "Is this another damn solar sales rep?" Probably the 20th guy this year. They laugh, I laugh, and what they don't say is, "Hey, you're the 20th guy on my," So learning how to, knowing that there's a solution to everything, you just need to find it, and then applying it to sales. It's just so easy with door to door. It's like Okay, that's the fourth time I got this objection. How do I overcome it before they bring it up? And then that translates to raising capital. I didn't have any experience with that. To fuel Dirty Doe's growth in the last 2 years, I raised 9 million, and it was same sales concepts, right? Same outreach, same referrals, same everything I did with door to door translated almost perfectly to raising money to fuel the franchise company.
No, I think that's great. And what I hear you saying is anticipating objections really when it comes to it and it comes to learning, right? So if you're in sales, whether you're knocking on doors, you're cold calling or whatever it is you're doing, if you get ahead of it, then you kind of put them almost on the defensive, and sometimes they can even laugh. So I think I think that's awesome.
And that's the communication. So that's the answer to like, what is the communication? How does that? You're a professional communicator by foreseeing their needs as much as possible. Like that's what professional communication is. And if you can't, then you're asking the right questions, right? But what you're not doing is just shoving crappy information down their throat and hoping that they buy at the end.
Now, another area that I really like what I've since I've been researching you is how you talk about putting a value to your time. Can you share a little bit about how you go about doing that?
Yeah. If you're straight commission, it's easy, right? So I have to make how many phone calls? So, but we'll stick with door to door. How many doors do I have to knock to get somebody to answer? Well, it's going to depend on the time of day, but on average, 20. Kind of making up these numbers, right? If I knock on 20 doors, and if I'm in it's the evening, then I'm probably going to get 13 of them to answer, right? And of those 13, 10 of them are actually going to be homeowners, decision makers. And of those 10, I'm going to set appointments with probably 6 or 7 of them because I'm really good at setting appointments. And of those 6 or 7, I'm going to have 1 to 2 drop off that don't keep their appointment. So maybe I only have 4 or 5 appointments. 4 or 5 appointments, I close 90% of the people that'll listen to me. So let's call it 3 deals. I make 10 grand a deal. So I made 30 grand and then I trace it all back. Okay. How long did it take me to knock on 20 doors? 5 minutes a piece, an hour. I don't know. Right. I mean, it's way longer than that because you're talking to people. Let's call it 4 hours. 4 hours to knock your doors and have those conversations. How long did it take to set up the appointment, to the cancellations, and then even, okay, well, what about the follow-up appointments? Because even when they sign, I still have to spend another 2 or 3 hours to make sure. Then you calculate it. Okay, I spent 30 hours and I made 3 sales. That's 30 grand. So I'm worth $1,000 an hour. And then it's, hey, Bennett, our books are in a mess. Can you get in there and clean it up? And it's like, no, I could go knock more doors and make the company $1,000 an hour, and I could pay somebody $28 an hour. So I'm going to make the company $980 an hour more by refusing to do the books.
That is exactly what I'm talking about, Bennett. We have what Bennett's saying here is understand what your value is and outsource some of this work, because we have a lot of sales reps, sales executives who listen to this show, and sometimes they'll come to me and say, "Hey, David, I'm gonna take a PTO day so I can go paint the garage or something like that." Well, what is your time worth, right? So first of all, you could pay somebody $20 an hour, $30 an hour to get that done. If you're making $400 or $500 an hour, when it comes to focusing on sales related opportunities, and taking that even a step back, I loved how you were talking about, okay, well, how many calls do I need to make to get as many leads that I need to have in order to close an opportunity? It's putting that all together, because when you do that, you understand what it's going to take to hit your pipeline or whatever it is your goal is. So I think that's brilliant.
I think it really gives you the clarity, and especially in sales, when you start every day with $0, if I don't find somebody to agree with me that this product solves their needs, I don't make any freaking money. So and then you're knocking doors in the morning and nobody's answering. But if you're like, law of averages, I'm worth $1,000 an hour, not this hour right now, but on average. So that allows you to keep pushing. And, same thing with investment, same thing with anything. If you know your numbers, how many people to have to outreach, then it's like, okay, I got 19 no's. I'm probably close to a yes. Maybe I'll get another 19 no's, but then I'll probably get 2 yeses in a row because I know law of averages apply.
Switching gears, earlier we were talking about, I heard you talk about, anxiety, fear, even maybe imposter syndrome. I've been there as well. And I used to overcome that with drinking, right? I mean, it numbed the pain for, or relieved that anxiety. And, I quit drinking 8 years ago. Funny enough, my final drink was at Courtney's engagement party. I called up, I went with a couple of employees afterwards, good friends, Jamie Tadlock and Evans Hood. And I said, hey, this is order whatever you want. This is my final bottle of wine. Nobody believed me, but I did it. And as we've spoken before on your show, it was one of the greatest decisions I've ever made. Can you share with us a little bit about your journey and how it's impacted, first of all, how'd you get sober and how it's impacted you both as a leader and also as a parent?
Yeah. Sobriety is the greatest gift I've ever received. And everything that I have now is on borrowed time. And, in a nutshell, I realized that I had no control over drinking anymore. I should have really realized that much earlier, but I realized it when I got into a DUI accident in 2012, and it was at that time sitting in a jail cell, thinking about the person that I was that I never wanted to be. I never wanted to hurt anybody. I never wanted to be an alcoholic. Growing up, nobody in my life was an alcoholic or an addict. So that was always something that was way on the periphery in the DARE program, where we looked at alcoholics or drug addicts as people that were sleeping behind dumpsters because they had it so bad. But I was going to work. I was doing my job. I was doing, things that normal people do, but I still had no control over it. It had complete control over me. The point where in a blackout, I got behind the wheel and drove and nearly and could have killed somebody. Fortunately, that didn't happen. And fortunately, I was, by grace or whatever, given another chance. And that was my last drink in 2012, over 12 years ago. And I entered an AA program the very next day after walking out of the jail cell and went every day for a year. And then continued to basically just make sobriety my lifestyle to the point where, over time, it's not an easy process getting sober, and I don't want to minimize it, but, to the point now where I look at alcohol as not just something that's not for me, not just because I can't drink it but something to me that is just, there's no use for it, that it does not serve any purpose in our society. That there's no good, at least there's no good purpose for it to be as a consumable, in my opinion. And that's not to yuck anybody else's yum who likes wine or anything like that, but it's just it's the feeling I have about it over time as I've developed it. My life has gotten so good in sobriety that I see no use for it whatsoever, and I pray every morning that feeling in my mind continues and that I don't have the desire to drink again.
I'm really interested in what you had talked about in terms of your sobriety and how it tied into your anxiety disorder. I know you refer to your anxiety disorder. Sometimes you reframe it as a superpower. Yeah. As someone who, as a normal person, especially a working mom, I am no stranger to the concepts of anxiety. So I'm really curious about how you reframe it. Well, a little bit, but I'd love to know how you got to the point where you were able to reframe that. And did that come through your journey into sobriety? And was that a byproduct of it?
Yeah, I think when I started drinking, I didn't know that alcohol would be the thing that helped alleviate my anxiety at that time. But the first drink that I had when I went to visit the college that I would ultimately go to, UCSB, which
there you go.
is known as a drinking school. I'm not going to lie. But so my first drink there, it was just like this feeling, this immediate like realization that this was the thing that was solving my problems. I didn't know that I had like problems at that time, but I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm social. I can actually speak to girls. I could actually, be social and enjoy life. And that kind of became the catalyst for what would become a real significant drinking problem. And so I think that was my relationship with fear as I got into college, because that's ultimately when the panic attacks started too. And I realized that by drinking, I could suppress the panic attacks, the constant panic and anxiety that I would have, the fear of actually walking out of my house to go to a class, or having to interact with other people, or this just complete anxiety that was constantly consuming me. And so that was kind of my relationship with alcohol for the next decade. It was dealing with the crippling panic and anxiety on a day-to-day basis during the course of the day, and then drinking myself into numbness at night to kind of suppress it. That was it. And then when I had the DUI accident, I realized that, okay, these things are coming to a head. Now I'm not just a danger to myself, I'm a danger to others. And I felt complete hopelessness in the jail cell, to the point where I did consider, taking my life, because it was just that, it was that all consuming. I didn't know how to get over what I was experiencing. And I didn't tell anybody. I didn't talk to anybody about it, because I felt like I was alone. I felt like what I was experiencing was lonely. I didn't know that other people experienced this kind of shame or panic or anything like that. But what happened was, thankfully I chose to walk into a community of help. And what I realized is that we can not necessarily get over our fears. We can face our fears and learn to actually embrace our fears. When we find a community of support, whether that be Alcoholics Anonymous, or a community of triathlon or endurance or business group or a mastermind or whatever it may be, a community that's specifically designed to help you through the problems that you're collectively facing, is the path to healing. That's the first step in path to healing. Vulnerability in that community is another part of that healing. And when you can go through that, when you can join that community and vulnerably express what you're feeling, what you're experiencing, you do not only just start to heal, but you actually start to see the superpower that exists in that. And for me, with fear was nothing more. Fear was something that was terrorizing me for years, or what I felt like, right? But at that point, fear just became a signal. It was a signal for things that were trying to grab at my attention and tell me something, that either this was a danger that I had to avoid, but in most cases it wasn't a danger, because I wasn't like facing anything that was life-threatening. In most cases, it was an opportunity to just lean into that fear a little bit and grow. And the case in point was when I started to pursue triathlon, something that terrified me. I didn't want to swim in the ocean, like 2 miles in the ocean, no way. But there was a fear there. And I realized that in a year into sobriety, after having these tools and being immersed in that community, I realized that maybe if I lean into that fear, a little bit, that fear is telling me that could be an opportunity to grow. And that's the lesson. So to Damon's question earlier about, what lessons, how do I take that into leadership? Well, now within sobriety, I have that clarity where that fear comes in, and now I have a relationship with it. It very rarely causes panic attacks anymore, though that still does creep in. It still causes anxiety, but it's also a signal that maybe there's something there to look at a little bit more closely that might be an opportunity to grow. And that's how I kind of see that in business. It's how we implemented EOS. It's how we implemented various programs. I think it's how we grew to where we were, is because we collectively as a team started to lean into that fear a little bit, to go into the dark forest and face some of those fears and grow.
Before we get off of this topic, I want to talk about a different fear. And I know that you're considering pivoting your podcast to multi-generational families, but also maybe helping leaders who are considering getting sober or are sober. Mm-hmm. And one of the big challenges I had that I worked through, but a lot of people who are friends of mine who are considering maybe stopping drinking, they're like, well, how am I going to do that? How am I going to go to a business function where everything is surrounded by drinking? What advice do you have for somebody like ourselves of dealing with that initially?
Yeah, I think initially it's hard, and I don't want to minimize it, because I went through it, just having to go to cocktail parties and all of that stuff. Even today, where people know me as a sober person, I'm very open about it. I'll still get emails, solicitations saying, "Hey, I have a free bottle of wine for you if you have a conversation with me." And my response is usually, "You have not researched me at all." But I think that my advice to anybody that's struggling with that is club soda is your friend. Always carrying a glass of club soda. Depending on how open you want to be about that, I tend to, unless and this is something you want to work through with a therapist, with your sobriety team, whatever that may be, at AA or however that is, but. I believe, at least for me, that that being open and honest about my sobriety was kind of one of the biggest steps I took towards actually healing through it. It took a couple of years from my point of sobriety to actually start being open about it. But when I started being open about that sobriety, it imprinted it as part of my identity. And so I realized, I think after those first couple of years, that the anonymity part was starting to become a bit of a crutch for me. So now it's like people know me as that, and now I can do that. But I think it's also important to recognize too that there's a bit of a movement happening within executive leadership or entrepreneurship or high achievers in general where I hear a lot more those people saying alcohol is just not serving me anymore and I'm not doing it. So even just making it a lifestyle choice, there is no shame in that. Even when people line up the tequila like shots and say, hey, we're taking shots, you could just be like, no, this is a lifestyle choice for me right now. I say own it. Own it is a source of empowerment. That sobriety is a powerful tool for you, and even offer maybe to be the designated driver. That may be the biggest selling point to whoever you might be trying to sell that night or whatever. There's opportunities there to just really lean into yourself authentically. And I think the key is just not associating it yourself and really looking at your motives for why you want to keep that sobriety a secret or why you want to avoid it. Is there still a little bit of deeper shame there that you have to work through? But don't associate the sobriety with shame. Work towards getting to the root of the shame that you're feeling, but the sobriety part of it is not a source of shame in of itself.
I agree. I mean, I think it's almost cool these days to be sober.
Yeah.
It's really took me a little bit, but yeah, I owned it, and now people admire it and they're pretty cool about it. I know we're running up on time, but I want to talk a little bit about your TEDx and the experience of getting approved to do it, and a little bit about your talk around puns and communities.
Yes. Yeah, it was exciting. So it's always been on my bucket list to do a TED Talk, and there was a subject that I was very, very that spoke to me very, very well. And I had a TEDx coach named Cesar Cervantes who was incredible. He helped me a lot to get onto that stage, and we worked through kind of setting this topic together, and when we talked through it, when we kind of brainstormed it, I was like, yeah, that's the thing. So for about 8 years now, ever since about 2015, I've been posting a pun a day on Facebook. Just been posting a stupid dad joke. And the reason I started doing that was I found that I was starting to get immersed in all of the negativity, all of the just debate that's happening on social media that goes nowhere. And it was just this circular arguments of like the politics and all of this kind of stuff. And I realized that it was just really affecting my mindset, really making me angry. And I think if you're, maybe listeners out there may be thinking to themselves that's how I feel. I hate that I go onto Facebook and I see these things that just trigger this sense inside of me. So in 2015, it was at the height of like the primary election season. And I decided to just start like rigorously unfollowing all of the political stuff and then just posting a joke a day for 30 days. And it made me feel so much better. And what I realized through that process was that when I did that, when I posted something positive and creative, that people started to respond to that. People started to post their own puns, so that when I would go back to Facebook, I'd get that little notification that says somebody commented on your thing. It's a comment that wasn't a debate, wasn't telling me how wrong I was or what it was, just another dumb joke that I could laugh at. So throughout the course of this day, I created a community of people that could that just formed this positivity just simply by accident. And so the nature of my TED Talk was how to accidentally really create a community through small creative acts every day. In my case, it was puns. And yeah, it was a awesome talk. It's very topical right now. I really enjoyed delivering it. And I think if you're feeling like you're struggling through like all of the social media distraction and all that, this might be a good topic for you to listen to.
That was, I will say, I was jotting down some of the run-ons with the state names. How am I going to do this when my husband gets home and just totally wow him? Because all of our jokes come from the dad joke books I get him every
Right.
Christmas. Though they were original and good, and I really appreciated you sharing those. I'm just curious. One question I have, and then I'll let Damon, bring us home. But what are you reading right now that I should read?
Oh, okay. I am reading a good book, and I hope my parents aren't listening to this. But no, in all honesty, I think it's a book that should be required reading for everyone, and especially in family business. The book is called The Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents.
Ooh.
And so you could see how parents might like get this feeling of like, oh, what am I emotionally immature? No, that's not the nature of it. I think going back to my earlier point that all, like even in business, we should all expect that we're doing something right now that is going to be something that's going to have to be repaired in the future. It kind of gives us that sense of humility. And the reason I'm reading that book now is not because I feel like I've been harmed, but because I want to be self-aware of what, of what I might have experienced, that the way I'm experiencing life based on how maybe my parents influenced me, but also how I'm parenting my kids and maybe how I might be influencing them with some of my emotional immaturity, and how that's coming out. So it's a very, very powerful book. I highly recommend it to anybody.
Breaking the cycle. I really like that. Thank you for that recommendation.
I'm gonna pick it up as well.
Yeah.
So one of our signature questions, Adam, that we have here, I mean, you've been incredibly open and transparent. One of our signature questions is, tell us something about you that most people are unaware of, that they don't know about you.
That's really hard to source because I'm pretty much an open book. But I will say, I think that I think that something people might not know about me is that every time I get in front of a camera or get on, a show like this, or step into a boardroom or face the day sober, I feel a sense of feeling like I'm a fraud, like I don't belong. And that is one of the lies that I'm telling myself, and I recognize it's a lie. But it is something that I have to actively work towards to get through. And so people might be feeling that too, in terms of like how they feel when they get onto things. But as I'm sitting here, it's it does come up that I feel like maybe I don't belong, or maybe I am a fraud. And so working through that is part of my daily routine.
You talk about being proud. Share with us, we talked about this a little bit before, your proudest moment.
A lot of people have to guess at that. I honestly don't. I was at NC State the first time I ever did business school. First time I ever got asked that. And I said, my proudest moment was, so I got to business school. My mother had already passed away. My dad never had the opportunity to go to finish high school. He enlisted in the Navy at 16 on 2 months after Pearl Harbor. So I didn't come from a family of where education was even known. Their parents were immigrants. And I got to, and now the business school, Notre Dame says we want to do a 2-day ceremony. I'm like, just send me a plaque. I really don't want to do that. And they said, well, not to be crude, but this isn't about you. We want other people to think this is a good idea. most people don't give away the money at your age. They give it away much later. And it's a pretty cool thing for us. Okay. So I asked my dad to go. And my dad got claustrophobia late in life. Weird thing. I was in Notre Dame Stadium with him. We got to leave. We got to leave. Like, really? Yeah. And so I was very sensitive. He said, look, Tom, I'll go, but I can't be the crowds. I said, the moment you're uncomfortable, we'll turn around and leave. We'll just go home. I'll tell him, hey, did my best, we're out of here. So I endowed a scholarship there in his name when my mom died in 1994, the year we started. Then she died suddenly at 67, totally unexpected. And there's one kid a year who gets a scholarship. Arthur A. Mendoza Scholar. And when I called it in, calling to a university is pretty cool for them. And I said, there's three things, requirements. They don't want to hear that. You got to give it to my kids. I said, number one, I don't care if it's black, white, green, yellow person, whatever it is. They're just a great fit for Notre Dame, in your opinion. But I really don't care about it. Number two is they got to have everything you want except money. And someone's going to call them and say, Damon, someone you've never met is paying your education at University of Notre Dame. One kid a year, still going. It's an infinity scholarship. And then they go, what's number three? I said, number three is they got to write my dad a letter every semester. He's a letter writer. My mother just passed. So 6 years later, we endowed a business school, and it's going to start off with these kids. He's paying for their education, meeting him. And he panicked on the way there. He said, Tom, they're going to want to see you because they had posters up. I said, I don't think so. Let's just try it. They ignored me. They were like, oh, Artie Mendoza. And they brought their dad's war books and stuff. So now we leave there. And they did a big ceremony on Friday night. But Saturday morning, my dad and I go, they're playing Nebraska, was number one in the country. This is when Nebraska was a superpower. We ended up losing the game in overtime. But my dad and I go to mass with the church with the team, walk through, 100,000 people into the stadium, into the locker room with the team, and through the tunnel, the famous tunnel with the sign.
Yep.
And now my dad's going to walk the flag out for the national anthem in front of 80,000 people. And so what happens is they have the honor guard, they come walking out and they present the flag, and then my dad has the flag. So I'm walking in the middle of the field. Now, by the way, Warren Buffett was at the event the day before because we were playing Nebraska, which was kind of cool. But my dad walks the flag and presents it. They start playing the national anthem. Flag goes halfway up. He snaps into a salute and two Mirage fighters right over us. And they just announced it was the largest gift to Notre Dame in history at that time, since. But my father in a salute, flags halfway up, and the crowd went crazy. It was like Jack Welch and Larry Bossy ran out of the stands. I didn't know either of them. I knew who they were, but I didn't know. And I'll never forget, he grabbed me, hugged me, he said, what a great thing for an American to do. I was like, okay, that's it. That's the proudest moment if anybody asks.
That's incredible. My last question, Tom. You and I have something in common. We both have young children.
Yes.
We're not whippersnappers, but we have young children. What are you hoping for over the next couple of decades for our kids in this world, especially around leadership?
I'll tell you what I hope. I have a 4.5-year-old daughter and a 9-year-old son. And what I want and what I believe they have today is empathy. They both are very empathetic. Somebody said, what do you hope for your kids? They were talking about schools and where you want them to go. I said, I want a kid that's kind and has empathy. Because I think we can work on the rest. But I just think that's really the type of person I want to see them develop into. For the world, I'm very concerned about a lot of things that have happened, where we're going. My way of thinking of things is, how do you make the tide lift all boats? Not how do you make the top people have the most boats. And, these things change over time, but it's pretty scary to me that what's being held up and appreciated in many circles is not what I think is should be held up and appreciated or celebrated. So all we can do, I think, as dads and parents, I want to make sure that they have good friends. I think where you end up 10 years from now is going to depend upon who your friends are today when you're young. I gave a talk for a high school, which was a very hard speech to give. I'd never been put in that spot during COVID, high school graduation. But that's what I said. I said, I kind of just talked about what worked for me, but I said, you're all leaving here now. Most of your friends now, because they live in your neighborhood. And it's geographically based. Now you're going away to school. And a lot of times you're going to meet completely new people if you go away. Like at Notre Dame, it's very different. There's 2% of student bodies from the state where the school is. So everybody's coming from somewhere. Choose wisely. Choose people who will make you aspire. Choose people you're proud to be around. Choose people who make you the best version of yourself. That's true when you decide to get married too, right? You want someone who makes you be the best version of yourself. You're not looking for change you into something else. But if you're fortunate enough to say, I have friends like that, and I have a partner like that, I think things are going to go well for you. Can't solve the planet all the time, but I think I think about that a lot.
Tom, what an amazing conversation.